I'm no longer your investor. Apologies? Ask the parasite.
3 years with Anna felt like constructing something genuinely substantial and lasting. I'm an attorney specializing in corporate litigation. She worked as a paralegal while pursuing her JD at one of the most prestigious law schools in the state. We shared my meticulously renovated Victorian house, a restoration project I dedicated countless weekends and years of my life to perfecting, and I covered her complete education costs, roughly $150K over 3 years. This wasn't casual financial support or charity. I was making a deliberate investment in the woman I fully intended to marry and the shared life and future we were methodically constructing together. But there was always this persistent underlying tension, like an irritating hum of discord that never quite disappeared. Her college best friend, Leo. This guy was a freelance graphic designer, barely scraping by on restaurant menu design gigs and small business logos. Yet he carried himself with the pretentious air of some unappreciated artistic visionary destined for greatness. He'd successfully weaponized undermining our relationship into a sophisticated art form, never overtly enough to confront directly without seeming paranoid, just calculated psychological warfare expertly disguised as concerned friendship and protective loyalty. His primary tactical strategy involved constantly referencing and romanticizing Anna's ex-boyfriend Alex, some struggling indie musician who'd emotionally devastated her during their tumultuous 2-year relationship. When I'd plan a romantic weekend getaway to Cancun or arrange surprise dinner reservations at high-end restaurants, Leo would mysteriously recall some magical, spontaneous camping adventure or perfect impromptu road trip he and Anna once shared during their college years. You remember that incredible weekend, right, Anna? Those absolutely perfect moments can't be manufactured or scheduled. You need someone who truly understands and appreciates your wild, free-spirited soul. The subtext was always absolutely identical. I represented boring security and suffocating monotony while he served as gatekeeper to the authentic, passionate, creatively fulfilling existence she was allegedly sacrificing for financial stability. Anna swallowed his manipulation completely. That's just Leo being protective. He supported me when Alex shattered my world. He genuinely cares about my happiness. He's like family, Jack. Meanwhile, this family member was systematically draining our finances. Anna had transferred him money at least 4 times in recent months from our joint account that I exclusively funded. I was literally bankrolling the guy actively working to destroy my relationship. Patience is essential in my profession. You don't pounce on preliminary evidence. You allow opposing counsel to construct their own downfall. I waited for Leo to provide me the ammunition I needed. The opportunity finally arrived 4 weeks ago, after months of waiting. I'd just secured the most significant legal victory of my entire career, a complex corporate fraud case that had consumed 6 months of my existence. Half a year of my life vanished completely into depositions, witness interviews, document review, and sleepless preparation sessions. But we prevailed spectacularly in court, and it represented a genuinely career-defining moment for both my firm's reputation and my future advancement prospects. To commemorate this hard-earned achievement, I organized an elegant dinner party for my inner circle, close friends who'd barely seen me during those absolutely grueling months of legal warfare. Making an effort to maintain domestic harmony and appear generous, I encouraged Anna to invite her entire social group as well. Naturally, this decision guaranteed Leo's inevitable attendance at my celebration. Initially, the evening unfolded absolutely perfectly according to plan. Exceptional company filling every room, premium vintage wine I'd been specifically reserving for momentous occasions, finally experiencing genuine relaxation and satisfaction after what felt like an eternity of professional stress and pressure. Leo predictably gorged himself on my expensive booze collection while behaving as though he co-owned the entire residence and had equal claim to hosting duties. Several drinks deep into the evening, he decided to stage his inevitable performance for our captive audience. He launched into some incredibly pompous, pseudo-intellectual dissertation about a contemporary art exhibition he'd allegedly attended, which served as elaborate setup for lecturing everyone present about the fundamental philosophical divide between authentic creators and soulless corporate drones. It represents entirely different approaches to existing in the world, he proclaimed with theatrical gravity, maintaining aggressive, challenging eye contact with me specifically. Certain individuals are motivated by genuine passion, by true artistic expression and creative integrity. Others prioritize more conventional, mundane concerns like financial security and social respectability. He deliberately savored a prolonged, contemptuous sip of my expensive wine while delivering this pronouncement. My friends immediately recognized his game and were transmitting looks that could spoil dairy products. I maintained a controlled smile and refused to engage with his provocation. But Leo wasn't finished orchestrating his show. He pivoted toward Anna, adopting his signature concerned friend persona. "I genuinely hope you found true fulfillment, Anna," he announced, voice saturated with manufactured sincerity. "Jack's undeniably a decent person. He provides stability. He's a reliable provider. He's dependable." He pronounced dependable like diagnosing a terminal illness. Then he executed a theatrical pause, locked eyes with me directly, and allowed that characteristic smug expression to spread across his features. "But honestly, you could definitely do significantly better than him." There it was, the rope I'd been anticipating. Complete silence engulfed the table. The proverbial pin could have been audible. My friends appeared ready to physically restrain themselves from vaulting across the furniture. Anna simply stared downward at her plate, flushed with embarrassment, not anger directed at him, but mortification that he'd created a public spectacle. In that instant, everything crystallized with perfect clarity. The patient attorney vanished. The man who'd just experienced fundamental disrespect in his own residence before his closest friends, from someone benefiting from his generosity. That individual assumed control. I placed my silverware down deliberately, clasped my hands together, and focused my attention entirely on Leo. The gracious host had departed. The prosecutor had approached the bench. "That's quite a provocative assertion, Leo," I stated, my voice assuming a dangerously quiet tone. "I am genuinely fascinated by your logic. What specific qualities define a superior man for Anna? Please elaborate with precision. Present your criteria systematically." Leo was completely blindsided. He'd prepared for emotional confrontation, not methodical cross-examination. "Well, obviously, you understand," he fumbled. "Someone more compatible with her personality, a creative individual, someone who truly comprehends her essence." "Fascinating," I acknowledged with a thoughtful nod. "So, creative aptitude represents the primary qualification. Intriguing hypothesis, and I presume you consider yourself embodying this description?" "I believe I understand her more profoundly than anyone else," he declared, inflating with renewed confidence. "Excellent. So you've established yourself as the benchmark standard. Let's scrutinize that claim thoroughly. Rather than discussing abstract concepts, let's examine tangible investments." I leaned forward slightly. "As everyone present knows, Anna is currently enrolled in her second year at an elite law institution. Prestigious program, corresponding price point. I'm financing that entirely. Tuition, textbooks, living expenses, everything. This represents more than financial commitment. It's an investment of faith. Faith in her potential, faith in our shared future." Leo's complexion was already shifting toward pale, but I was far from finished. "So my question for you, Leo, as the self-declared gold standard of what constitutes better for Anna, what tangible investments have you made in her future recently, beyond your consistently destructive commentary about me? Let's also examine the vehicle she operates. Safe, reliable, ensures she reaches campus without mechanical failures. I purchased that for her. Now you also own transportation, correct? That stylish convertible that seems to spend more time receiving repairs than providing transportation. Anna's had to loan you money for mechanical issues at least 4 separate times in recent months, hasn't she? Funds from the household account that, incidentally, I'm the sole contributor to. So in very literal terms, I'm not just investing in Anna's future, I'm also subsidizing your transportation expenses. You're welcome for that." One of my dinner guests actually snorted with barely suppressed amusement. Leo appeared as though he'd been physically struck. "And finally," I continued, leaning closer, my voice dropping to an even lower register, "let's discuss this residence. The shelter above her head. I own this property. I manage the mortgage payments. I handle maintenance when systems fail. You, conversely, have been delinquent on your rent payments so frequently that Anna has repeatedly covered your obligations, once again, using income I generated." I reclined in my chair, prepared for the closing argument. "So, allow me to summarize your position for our audience here. You're contending that a man who provides stable housing, dependable transportation, and completely funded elite education somehow represents an inferior choice, and that a superior alternative would be someone who functions as a financial drain, who depletes her resources and repays her generosity by systematically sabotaging her relationship from what can only be characterized as pathetic, transparent, and profoundly disturbing obsession. Does that accurately represent your position, Leo? The room had become absolutely silent. Leo remained seated there, completely destroyed, like a witness who'd just been methodically dismantled during testimony. He couldn't even formulate words. I surveyed my friends, who were observing Leo with undisguised contempt. Then I focused on Anna. Her expression displayed a turbulent mix of emotions, but the dominant one wasn't relief or appreciation. It was pure, incandescent rage. She erupted from her chair with such violence that the legs scraped harshly against the flooring. Her entire body trembled. "I cannot believe you just humiliated him like that," she hissed venomously. "You destroyed him in front of everyone present." "He destroyed himself, Anna," I responded, suddenly feeling profoundly exhausted. "I simply presented the factual evidence." "Apologize to him immediately," she demanded, her eyes blazing with fury. "Apologize to my best friend for what you just did. Apologize right now or we are finished." And there it materialized, the ultimatum, the final piece of evidence I needed. She was standing beside the wreckage of a man who'd just been exposed as a manipulative parasite, and she was defending him. She was choosing his side over mine. The love I'd harbored for her didn't gradually fade in that moment. It was executed instantly. I observed her and experienced perfect clarity for the first time. I didn't become angry or raise my voice. I simply smiled. Small, melancholy, and completely final. Without uttering another word, I stood up, collected my wine glass, and walked toward the kitchen, leaving her standing alone in the silent dining area. The case had concluded. The verdict was delivered. Anna and Leo departed together that evening amid dramatic chaos and wounded pride. She relocated to his apartment immediately, a decision clearly made during the heat of rage and his humiliation. In her mind, she'd issued a challenge and was expecting me to return groveling, to beg and repair what I had destroyed. She was completely unaware that I'd simply accepted her terms. For 2 complete weeks, I maintained absolute silence, didn't answer her calls, ignored the flood of angry, then confused, then desperate messages. I completely ghosted the mutual friends she dispatched to advocate her case. Rather than pursuing her, I got busy. My house, which had felt like our shared home, now felt like a crime scene requiring cleanup. I dedicated an entire weekend to methodically packing every single possession she owned into cardboard boxes. This wasn't vengeful or vindictive, it was therapeutic cleansing. I was functioning as an executor settling the estate of a deceased relationship. After completing that task, I stacked everything in the spare bedroom, replaced all the locks, updated the security system codes, and placed 2 telephone calls. They weren't enjoyable conversations, but they represented the logical consequences of the verdict she'd delivered. The first call went to the dean of admissions at her law school. I maintained an excellent relationship with him through my alumni activities. I explained in calm, professional language that due to a permanent change in my personal circumstances, the private scholarship fund I'd established to cover Anna's educational expenses was being dissolved with immediate effect. The second call went to the managing partner at my firm. I'd expended considerable political capital to secure Anna a highly coveted summer internship position there, a genuine career-launching opportunity. I explained that a severe and irreconcilable personal conflict of interest had developed, and the offer required immediate rescission. I derived no satisfaction from these actions, but my support had been entirely predicated on the foundation of our partnership. She'd demolished that foundation with a sledgehammer. The entire structure was collapsing. Precisely 2 weeks following the dinner, she appeared at my doorstep. I observed her through the security camera, fumbling with her old key, confusion transforming to panic when it failed to function. Eventually, she pressed the doorbell. I opened the door while maintaining the security chain attachment. She looked absolutely terrible. The righteous indignation had vanished, replaced by weary desperation. Cohabiting with a financially struggling narcissistic artist had evidently provided a harsh education in reality. "Jack, we need to have a conversation," she said, her voice barely audible. "No, Anna, we don't," I responded calmly. "You made your choice. The discussion is concluded." "You can't simply discard 3 years over a single argument," she pleaded, tears beginning to form. I was furious. I wasn't thinking rationally. It wasn't an argument, I clarified. It was a moment of truth. You were presented with a clear choice between your partner and the man who'd been systematically attempting to destroy our relationship. You chose him. You demanded I apologize to him. You chose to defend the parasite. That's not something I can overlook. Panic began settling in as she realized I wasn't yielding. But everything we had planned, she stammered. Law school, the internship, our entire future. Yes, regarding that, I said, allowing the silence to extend. Your final semester tuition is due next week, isn't it? I hope you and Leo have that situation resolved, because my investment in our future has been permanently terminated. Her face drained of all color. What? She whispered. And that internship at my firm, I continued mercilessly. That offer has been withdrawn. The firm treats conflicts of interest very seriously. She actually stumbled backward, hand flying to cover her mouth. That internship was her golden opportunity, and the future she'd been so confident about was dissolving before her eyes. You can't do that, she whispered, voice fracturing. Jack, please. You can't. I already have, I stated simply. Actions generate consequences, Anna. You presented me with an ultimatum. Apologize or we're finished. I selected finished. Now you must live with what that decision means. Go ask Leo for assistance, the man who's supposedly so much better than me. I'm confident his creative genius includes a strategy to cover your $50,000 tuition and replace the career you just sacrificed. I closed the door on her tear-streaked face. I didn't feel happy or sad or vindicated. I simply felt quiet and complete. The trial had ended. The aftermath unfolded exactly as predictably as expected. Anna's carefully constructed life completely disintegrated. She was forced to withdraw from law school just months before graduation. The dream died. The degree became worthless. She and Leo are apparently still cohabiting in his cramped apartment, which, according to mutual friends, represents a special kind of torment. She's consumed with resentment for what he cost her, and he's trapped with a woman who serves as a constant, bitter reminder of his own inadequacy and failure. He obtained the girl, but he got a broken version that he lacks the resources to repair. I didn't execute any of this for revenge or to inflict pain. I did it for myself, for my own self-respect and mental health. A relationship is fundamentally a contract built on mutual respect and loyalty. She violated the most basic terms of that contract when she chose to defend and prioritize a man who had openly insulted and disrespected me in my own home. My actions weren't punishment. They were simply enforcement of natural consequences. She wanted to understand what finished really looks like. Now she knows. It means the support stops, the investment ends, and the person who was constructing your future walks away, leaving you in the wreckage of the life you helped destroy. The case is closed, and there are no appeals available.
You?
I'm a private investigator, and my job has taught me to read people by what they hide, not what they say. You learn to see the world in layers of truth and deception, to read people not by their words, but by their actions, and most importantly, by what they're desperately trying to conceal. My girlfriend Jessica of 3 years always complained that this made me too cynical, too suspicious, too quick to look for angles where none existed. She said my work was poisoning our relationship, making me incapable of simple trust. Turns out I wasn't cynical enough. We lived together in my house, a place I'd bought and paid for with a decade of long nights, dangerous stakeouts, and assignments that most people couldn't stomach. Our relationship was, I thought, my one safe harbor from the brutal world I operated in daily. It was the one place I didn't have to look for the angle, the lie, the hidden motive lurking beneath surface smiles. We were partners in every sense, shared goals, shared life, shared dreams of a future together. I trusted her completely, gave her access to every part of my world, my finances, my vulnerabilities. In my line of work, trust is the highest currency, and I'd given her all of it without reservation. That was my first and most expensive mistake. The problem started, as these things often do, with what seemed like an innocent request. A 5-day girls' trip to Las Vegas with her 3 closest friends: Lauren, the twice-divorced ringleader who was perpetually on the hunt for her next sufferer; Becca, the mindless follower who mirrored Lauren's every opinion and mannerism; and Chloe, who was quiet and calculating, always watching, always listening, always seeming to catalog information for future use. I genuinely despised these women. They were loud, superficial, materialistic creatures who treated Jessica like their prized possession, their trophy friend who had somehow managed to land a stable, successful man. They constantly reminded her of her wild days before she met boring, stable, predictable me, filling her head with stories of adventures she was supposedly missing out on. A few days before the trip, I was helping her pack when I asked for her flight details and hotel name, just in case of emergencies. She turned to me with this strange, hard look in her eyes. "You don't need to know that," she said coldly. I was taken aback. I was genuinely trying to be helpful, supportive, the kind of boyfriend who cares about his girlfriend's safety without being controlling. "What do you mean?" I asked, completely caught off guard. "I just want to know where you are in case something happens. What if there's an emergency?" She crossed her arms defensively, and her voice took on this sharp, condescending tone I'd never heard before. "It's a girls' trip, Mark. The whole point is to get away from everything and everyone, including you. You don't need to know what happens on a girls' trip. You don't need to know where we're staying, what we're doing, or who we're with. That's why you're blocked from my phone until I'm home. Complete radio silence." Blocked. The word hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't asking for privacy or space. She was declaring a complete 5-day communications blackout, drawing a clear, unmistakable line between her life and our shared life. This wasn't about girls having fun. This was about deliberately excluding me from any knowledge of her activities. In my profession, when someone goes to such extreme lengths to hide their actions, it's never because those actions are innocent. But I didn't react. I didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't demand explanations. My training kicked in immediately. In my profession, when someone shows you a wall, you don't waste energy trying to break it down. You find a way around it. You use their defensive measures against them. The transformation in my mind was instantaneous and complete. My mind, trained through years of surveillance and investigation to see every angle and analyze every inconsistency, immediately shifted into full professional mode. The loving, trusting boyfriend who had been helping his girlfriend pack for a fun trip with her friends simply ceased to exist. The investigator, cold and methodical and relentlessly thorough, had just clocked in for what would become the most personally satisfying case of my career. "Okay," I said, voice perfectly calm. "I understand. Have a great time." Her confident, defiant expression faltered for just a moment, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion and maybe even disappointment. She'd expected a fight. Hell, she'd wanted one. She'd probably rehearsed this entire confrontation in her head, prepared for arguments about trust and communication and respect. A fight would have made her feel completely justified in whatever she was planning to do. My calm, easy agreement left her with absolutely nothing to push against, no righteous anger to fuel her upcoming deception. The next morning, I drove her to the airport like nothing had changed. She was practically glowing with excitement, chattering about spa treatments and shows and shopping, already mentally 1,000 miles away from me and our life together. As she grabbed her suitcase from the trunk, she leaned in to kiss me goodbye, and I could see the relief in her eyes. Relief that I hadn't made things difficult, that I was being the understanding boyfriend she needed me to be. "Don't miss me too much," she said with that playful wink that used to make my heart skip. "I promise I'll call you the moment I land to let you know I'm unblocking you. 5 days will fly by." "I won't," I replied. She laughed, thinking I was joking. I watched her walk into the terminal, dragging her suitcase behind her. Then I drove straight to my office. The investigation had already begun. She thought she was entering a carefully planned 5-day blackout where she could do whatever she wanted without consequences or oversight. What she had no idea of was that I was about to flood her entire world with the brightest, most unforgiving light imaginable. Every lie would be exposed, every deception unraveled, every secret dragged into the open for everyone to see. The first thing I did was run the license plate of the car that had picked up her friends that morning. Lauren, true to her narcissistic nature, had posted a picture on social media of all 4 of them posed in front of her house, suitcases at their feet, huge smiles ready for their big adventure. But in the background of that carefully staged photo was a high-end SUV, sleek, expensive, definitely not the kind of vehicle any of these women could afford. The plate came back registered to one Adam Cole, senior partner at a major investment firm, married father of 2 young children, and definitely not someone Jessica had ever mentioned knowing. Interesting. Jessica had told me they were flying budget airline. A little digging into flight manifests told a different story. There were no tickets under any of their names on commercial flights that day. But there was a private jet, owned by Adam Cole's firm that had filed a flight plan from our city to Vegas that morning. The blocking wasn't an obstacle. It was confirmation of deception. It gave me freedom to operate without having to maintain the facade of the trusting boyfriend. Her friends weren't careful. They were arrogant. Becca had a public social media profile and was a fountain of information, posting a steady stream of pictures and videos throughout the week. They were all carefully framed to look like a girls' trip. Cocktails by the pool, dancing at nightclubs, selfies at casinos, but amateurs always make mistakes. In the reflection of Becca's sunglasses in one selfie, I could see the clear outline of a man sitting across from them at a cabana. In a nightclub video background, I saw Lauren laughing and leaning intimately into a man who definitely wasn't her ex-husband. The biggest mistake was a photo Chloe posted, a group shot at a fancy dinner. In the background was a distinctive piece of art, a large, abstract painting. A reverse image search took me 5 minutes. The painting hung in the private dining room of one of the most exclusive high-roller suites in the Bellagio, a suite not available to the general public, reserved for the casino's biggest clients. I made some calls. A friend in casino security confirmed it. The suite was registered to Adam Cole. He was there for the week hosting business clients, and his guests included 4 women. My girlfriend Jessica was one of them. This wasn't a girls' trip. It was a paid party. She wasn't on vacation with friends. She was an accessory for a wealthy married man and his business associates. The final piece was the most painful. In one of Becca's videos, I saw Jessica talking to a man in the background. I couldn't see his face clearly, but something was familiar. I isolated the audio, cleaned it up, and ran it through voice analysis. The voice belonged to Scott, her ex-fiancé, the man she claimed to despise, who had supposedly cheated on her and broken her heart. He was one of Adam Cole's clients. The entire thing was a complex, layered, deeply insulting lie. She hadn't just gone on a trip without me. She'd gone to be with another man, funded by a different man, all while pretending to be with her friends. My course of action was clear. This wasn't a situation requiring conversation. It required consequences. Public, undeniable, life-altering consequences. I started with Adam Cole's wife, Catherine, a respected pediatrician and mother who seemed to have no idea what her husband was doing on business trips. I compiled a digital file containing the flight plan, hotel suite registration, and social media photos showing her husband with Lauren. I sent it to a reputable divorce attorney with an anonymous note. You might want to show this to your client, Catherine Cole. Her husband's business trips are more eventful than she knows. Next, I dealt with Scott. He was a real estate developer in the middle of messy business disputes with former partners. I sent an anonymous tip to an investigative journalist friend about a developer who funds lavish Vegas lifestyle with other people's money, including details about Scott's shady business dealings. Finally, I prepared for Jessica's return. She was due Sunday afternoon and had texted from a friend's phone. Having so much fun. Can't wait to see you. Pick me up at 3 p.m. Sunday. I'll unblock you when I'm on the plane. I replied with a simple, okay. She was expecting me, expecting a hug, kiss, and quiet drive home where she'd tell carefully edited stories about her trip. She had no idea what was actually waiting for her. I found the one person who had more right to be at that airport than I did. It took 2 days of work, but I found Emily, Scott's live-in girlfriend, a school teacher who had no idea her boyfriend was in Vegas. He'd told her he was at a wellness retreat in Arizona with no cell service. I called her. It was the hardest call I'd ever made. I told her who I was and what I'd found, sending her the evidence, audio files, pictures, hotel information. She was silent, then started crying. But after tears came cold, hard anger that matched my own. I told her about Jessica's flight and made a proposition. She's expecting me to be there, but I think you're the one she should see first. Emily agreed, without hesitation. Sunday afternoon, I wasn't at the airport. I was home, monitoring through a live feed from a security contractor, posing as a limo driver. Jessica's flight landed on time. I watched as she and her friends walked out, tanned, laughing, loaded with shopping bags. Jessica was on her phone, probably texting me, expecting me at the curb. Emily stood calm and composed in arrivals, holding a large, professionally printed poster, a crystal-clear, high-resolution photo from my casino contact showing Jessica and Scott sitting together at a blackjack table, his arm draped around her. Jessica saw Emily first. Her smile froze. Her face went pale. She stopped dead. Her friends, still chattering, bumped into her and followed her gaze to Emily and the poster. The laughter died. Jessica tried to recover, started walking away, pretending she didn't know Emily. But Emily was prepared. She stepped forward, voice clear and steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. Scott sends his apologies. He couldn't be here to welcome you home himself. He's a little busy explaining this picture to me. Jessica's friends looked at her with shock and dawning horror. They'd been part of the lie and were now caught in the blast radius. At that exact moment, a man in a crisp suit stepped forward. A process server I'd hired. "Jessica Miller?" he asked professionally and loudly. She nodded, completely stunned. "You've been served," he said, handing her a thick legal envelope containing a formal eviction notice giving her 30 days to remove belongings from my property, plus a restraining order preventing contact or coming within 500 feet of my house or business. The combination of public humiliation and legal documents was too much. Jessica crumpled, dropped her bags, covered her face, and started sobbing. Her friends didn't comfort her. They grabbed their bags and scattered like rats from a sinking ship, wanting no part of the mess they'd helped create. The beautiful, confident woman who'd blocked me 5 days earlier was now sitting on the airport floor, surrounded by expensive shopping bags, completely and utterly alone. The fallout was swift and comprehensive. Adam Cole's wife, Catherine, didn't waste time. She filed for divorce the next day. She liquidated significant joint assets into a trust for her children, which her prenup allowed in cases of infidelity. Adam faced a messy, expensive public divorce, and his firm reviewed his position since the scandal wasn't good for their family-oriented image. Scott's troubles deepened when the journalist ran the story about his shady business dealings. His partners sued him. His reputation was in tatters, and he faced potential criminal charges. Emily left him and, with my help, prepared legal action for financial damages. Jessica's life became a smoking crater. No boyfriend, no home, friends abandoned her. She had to call her parents to pick her up from the airport and moved into their spare bedroom, a 30-year-old woman whose entire life had reset to zero. She tried contacting me through burner phones and new email accounts. I never responded. My lawyer sent cease and desist letters reminding her of the restraining order. Her friends also tried reaching out with pathetic damage control attempts, claiming they had no idea what was really going on. I didn't respond to them either. They were irrelevant. I spent the week after her return systematically erasing her from my life. A professional moving company packed her belongings and delivered them to her parents' address. I changed my phone number and scrubbed my social media. To her and her world, I became a ghost. She thought she was playing a game, that she could have it all. The stability I provided and the thrill of a secret life. She didn't understand that in my world, there are no games. There are only facts, evidence, and consequences. She gave me a 5-day blackout. I gave her a lifetime of it. 6 months later, the dust had settled. After the initial satisfaction of revenge wore off, I was left with emptiness. I'd won, but victory felt hollow. I'd spent so much time looking for deception that I'd forgotten how to look for good. The person who helped me change that was Emily. We stayed in touch after the airport incident. 2 people betrayed by the same lie, finding comfort in shared experience. Coffee became dinner. We talked about jobs, families, dreams, everything except what happened. I discovered a woman who was kind, funny, and incredibly strong. We're dating now. Slow, careful, built on absolute honesty. It's the realest thing in my life. The others found their fitting conclusions. Adam's brutal divorce cost him everything: house, fortune, firm position. His reputation was destroyed. Lauren became a social outcast, seen as a liability by the wealthy men she used to associate with. Scott's legal troubles only deepened with official investigations, multiple lawsuits, and potential criminal charges. Jessica's story is the quietest and saddest. After months with her parents, she got a new job and moved to a small apartment, starting over alone. Her friends never came back. Her reputation never recovered. 2 months ago, I received one final communication, a letter forwarded by my lawyer. It was a long, handwritten apology. She didn't make excuses or ask for second chances, just owned it. She wrote that the airport humiliation was the worst day of her life, but also when she finally saw herself clearly, someone who valued others' attention more than one person's love. She was in therapy, hoping to become someone she could be proud of. She ended saying she didn't expect forgiveness, but was truly sorry for the pain she'd caused. Reading it, I felt closure instead of anger. Her apology seemed genuine, but some things, once broken, cannot be repaired. My revenge wasn't just about exposing lies. It was forcing people living in illusion to face undeniable truth. The airport was their stage, and they were all forced to remove their masks. What was left wasn't pretty. I don't think about them anymore. My life is full. I have a partner I trust, a business I'm proud of, and peace I hadn't felt in years. I still see the world in layers, but now I'm better at seeing good along with bad. Jessica thought she could block me out for 5 days. She didn't realize that in doing so, she was giving me space to build a new firewall protecting my life from her chaos forever. Behind that wall, everything is quiet, safe, and real.
Gloria, justice is here, but without you, it feels hollow.
The laughter stopped like a switch had been hit. One moment, the Donahue family was laughing at some joke I didn't get, maybe about me. And the next, there was only the sound of my body smashing through the glass doors onto the stone patio. Glass burst around me like a storm of tiny diamonds, catching the glow of the lights inside. Each piece seemed to hang in the air for a breath before falling, tumbling down like frozen bolts of lightning. I felt warm red run down my left cheek, likely from a sharp bit of glass that cut me on the way through. My Italian suit, the one Miriam made me wear because you need to look the part, Carter, was torn at the shoulder and speckled with shining shards. The cloth I had saved 3 months to buy was now ripped apart like cheap paper. But here's the thing that would have stunned them. I didn't scream, swear, or even flinch. I smiled, not some wild grin, just a small, calm smile that rose from deep inside me. Because as I lay on that cold stone, surrounded by wreckage and with the taste of iron in my mouth, I knew something they didn't. They had no idea what they had lost, what they had thrown away, what they had just set in motion. I'm Carter Wells, 36, an engineer and entrepreneur. When I married Miriam 7 years ago, I genuinely believed in love. Not the Hollywood version with dramatic music and perfect lighting, but the real deal. The kind where you wake up every morning grateful that this person chose to build a life with you. She was beautiful, smart, funny, and had this way of making me feel like the most interesting person in any room. What I didn't see was that her family looked at me like I was a piece of furniture they'd inherited from a dead relative, something they'd tolerate until they figured out how to get rid of it. I wasn't from money. My dad worked construction and my mom cleaned houses to make ends meet. I grew up in a neighborhood where people fixed their own cars because they couldn't afford to take them to a shop, where going out to dinner meant McDonald's was a special occasion. I earned my engineering degree on scholarships and student loans that took me 8 years to pay off, working nights at a warehouse to cover rent and ramen noodles. The Donahues, on the other hand, had connections going back generations. They knew senators by their first names, had country club memberships that got passed down like family heirlooms, and thought struggling meant having to wait 6 months instead of 3 for their custom yacht to be delivered. I was basically a caveman who'd somehow learned to wear a suit and use proper table manners, but I had vision. While Blake spent his trust fund on expensive cars and trips to Europe to find himself, I was building something real. Donahue Enterprises had this clean energy division that was basically a joke, hemorrhaging money, producing technology that was 10 years behind the competition, and staffed by guys who treated it like a side project they worked on when they felt like it. I saw the potential immediately. Clean energy wasn't just some trendy buzzword. It was the future. And whoever got there first was going to make serious money. I threw myself into that division like my life depended on it. Because in a lot of ways, it did. I redesigned their solar panel efficiency systems, streamlined wind turbine production, developed battery storage technology that could actually compete with what Tesla was putting out. I worked 60-hour weeks while Blake played polo on weekends, and Miriam went to yoga brunches with her girlfriends, talking about juice cleanses and whatever guru they were following that month. Over 4 years, I transformed their struggling side project into a billion-dollar venture. Not million, billion. With a capital B? The clean energy division went from being the embarrassing stepchild of Donahue Enterprises to being their biggest profit center. Major corporations were lining up to license our technology. Environmental groups were praising our innovations. Industry magazines were writing cover stories about our breakthrough designs. But here's where it gets really twisted. I wasn't listed on any of the paperwork. My name didn't appear on patent applications for technology I'd designed. I didn't have equity in the division I'd essentially created from scratch. I wasn't even getting proper credit in company newsletters or press releases. When Bloomberg wrote that big feature about Donahue Enterprises' Green Revolution, they quoted Julian and Blake extensively. But my name appeared exactly once in a photo caption, spelled wrong. When I finally worked up the nerve to speak up about it, when I suggested maybe it was time to discuss my official role in the company, or perhaps some kind of profit-sharing arrangement, Miriam would give me this patronizing smile and tell me to be patient. "They'll come around, Carter," she'd say, patting my hand like I was a child who didn't understand how the grown-up world worked. "You just have to give them time to see what I see in you." But they didn't come around. They never had any intention of coming around. I was useful to them, sure, but I wasn't family. I wasn't one of them. And in their world, that meant I would always be disposable, no matter how much money I made them or how many problems I solved. Then I found the ledger I was never supposed to see. Working late nights when everyone else had gone home to their fancy dinners and charity galas, I was trying to figure out why our energy usage stats for the Newark facility weren't adding up. The numbers looked wrong. Not wrong in the way that screams mistake, but wrong in the way that makes you squint at your computer screen and wonder if you're losing your mind. Digging through filing cabinets in the basement archive room at 2 in the morning, I found a leather-bound ledger wedged between environmental impact reports. The cover was worn smooth, and when I opened it, I could smell that particular scent of old paper and ink. At first glance, it looked like standard bookkeeping, revenue columns, expense tracking, the usual corporate paper trail. But I'm an engineer, which means I'm naturally suspicious of anything that doesn't add up perfectly, and these numbers were definitely not adding up. There were entries for payments to companies I'd never heard of, firms with generic names like Coastal Consulting Services and Atlantic Resource Management. The amounts were significant, sometimes 6 figures. But there was no explanation of what services these companies were supposed to be providing. More importantly, I couldn't find any corresponding invoices or contracts in our official filing system. I spent the next 3 weeks tracing these mysterious payments, following paper trails that led to more paper trails, cross-referencing bank statements with expenditure reports. What I discovered was absolutely stunning. Blake and Julian hadn't just been sloppy with the books. They'd been running a full-scale embezzlement operation for years. Those mystery companies were shell corporations, fake businesses that existed only on paper, with bank accounts that funneled money directly into personal accounts controlled by the Donahue family. Millions of dollars that should have gone toward research and development, employee benefits, or facility improvements had instead been diverted into offshore accounts. I found records of consulting fees paid to companies that had no employees, no offices, and no actual business operations. But embezzlement was just the beginning. As I dug deeper, I discovered they'd been falsifying environmental permits for years. The clean energy division that I'd worked so hard to build was operating under fraudulent documentation. Pollution reports had been altered, safety inspections had been faked, regulatory compliance documents had been forged. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was criminal. The kind of stuff that could result in federal charges, massive fines, and prison time. The Environmental Protection Agency doesn't mess around when it comes to permit fraud, especially when it involves energy production facilities. I made backups, lots of them. I copied every document, photographed every page, and stored digital copies in multiple locations. I was careful about it, too. I never printed anything on company printers, never used company computers for searches, and never accessed the files during normal business hours, when security cameras might catch me in areas I wasn't supposed to be. Over the next month, I built a comprehensive archive of their crimes. Every fake invoice, every forged permit, every illegal transfer. I organized it chronologically, cross-referenced it with official company reports, and documented every single discrepancy. Then I called Dr. Raina Lynn, an old friend from graduate school who'd gone on to become one of the most feared corporate attorneys in Washington, D.C. When I told her what I'd found, I could practically hear her grinning through the phone. "Yeah, Carter," she said, "are you telling me that Julian Donahue has been running a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme with virtually no legal safeguards in place?" When I confirmed that, yes, that was exactly what I was saying, she started laughing. Not happy laughter, but the kind of laugh a shark might make. "How quickly can you get to D.C.?" she asked. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We were going to acquire controlling interest in Donahue Enterprises, legally and quietly, using their own carelessness against them. Family-controlled companies often get sloppy about tracking minority shareholders, assuming that because they control the biggest chunk, the little guys don't matter. But those little guys add up. Working with Raina, I began systematically approaching these forgotten shareholders, early investors, former employees who'd been granted stock options, distant relatives who'd inherited small percentages over the years. We set up shell companies to handle the purchases, making it look like routine market activity rather than a coordinated takeover attempt. Some shareholders were easy to convince. Others needed more persuasion, but when you're offering premium prices for stagnant stock, most people don't ask too many questions. 4 months of careful maneuvering, late-night phone calls, discreet meetings in hotel lobbies, wire transfers structured to avoid triggering SEC reporting requirements. The genius was that Julian and Blake had no idea what was happening. They were so focused on their embezzlement schemes and environmental fraud that they never bothered to pay attention to something as mundane as minority shareholder transactions. By the time Blake started asking questions about unusual trading activity, it was too late. I'd reached 51% ownership of Donahue Enterprises. Not through hostile takeover or dramatic boardroom coup, but through simple legal stock purchases that their own sloppy record-keeping had made possible. I wasn't just the quiet husband anymore. I wasn't the disposable engineer they could push around. I was the majority shareholder of a billion-dollar company, and they had absolutely no clue what was about to hit them. The invitation came on cream-colored paper with embossed lettering. The Donahue family cordially invites you to join them for dinner. A time for family reconciliation and moving forward together. I knew it was BS, but this was exactly the opportunity I'd been waiting for. They were bringing me into their den, probably planning to corner me, intimidate me, maybe even try to buy me off. What they didn't realize was that I was walking into their trap with 51% ownership, burning a hole in my pocket like a loaded tool. The dinner itself was a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. They made small talk about the weather, asked polite questions about my work that they clearly didn't care about, and generally treated me with the kind of fake courtesy that rich people use when they're forced to interact with the help. About halfway through the main course, Julian cleared his throat. "Carter, we've been talking as a family about making changes to business structure." Blake leaned forward, wine making him bolder than usual. "We're thinking about selling off the clean energy division. There's been interest from overseas investors, and frankly, it's become more trouble than it's worth." My division, the billion-dollar venture that had saved their company from irrelevance. They wanted to dump it and cash out, probably to cover up their embezzlement or pay for legal problems when their fraud inevitably came to light. I stood up calmly. "That won't be happening," Blake scoffed. "Come on, Carter, this isn't really your call to make." "Actually," I said quietly, "it is." When I didn't sit down, Blake's face started turning red. "Sit down, Carter," he repeated, his voice taking on that entitled edge. When I said no, he snapped. Blake lurched to his feet, wine sloshing out of his glass, and before anyone could react, he had his hands on my shoulders. "You don't get to tell us no in our own house," he shouted. And then he shoved me hard toward the French doors. I could have resisted, could have stepped aside, could have deflected his clumsy drunk shove. But I didn't. I let momentum carry me backward, let my body crash through those expensive glass doors in an explosion of crystal and chaos. The silence that followed was absolute and perfect. I left that dinner with blood on my collar and fire in my chest. The second I walked through my front door, I was on the phone with Raina. "Blake just gave us everything we need," I said, pulling off my jacket and shaking glass fragments onto the hardwood floor. "Physical attack, witnesses, and the perfect justification for what we're about to do." What happened next was like watching a perfectly choreographed explosion in slow motion. Raina had spent years building relationships with financial journalists, business reporters, and industry analysts. The first press release went out at 11:47 p.m., hitting the wire services. Donahue Enterprises' majority shareholder exposes systematic fraud and environmental violations. She fed the complete documentation package to 3 different investigative journalism outlets simultaneously. Not summaries or excerpts, but the actual bank statements, the actual forged inspection reports, the actual emails discussing how to hide money from auditors. Raw, unfiltered evidence that told the story better than any narrative we could have written. I stayed up all night watching it unfold. The first story broke on a financial blog at 1:23 a.m. By 2:15, it had been picked up by Reuters. By 3:30, Bloomberg had confirmed the story. By 4:45, it was trending on Twitter with hashtag Donahue Scandal. Social media was beautiful to watch. Screenshots of documents, infographics explaining the fraud, memes about rich families getting their comeuppance. By sunrise, major news networks were scrambling to confirm the story and get interviews. Blake's face was plastered across every financial news channel by 7 a.m. The photo they kept using was from some charity gala, where he looked particularly smug and entitled, holding a glass of champagne and wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The contrast between that image and the headlines about fraud and attack was perfect. It told the whole story without needing any additional commentary. Around 2 p.m., Miriam showed up at my office looking like she hadn't slept. You ruined us," she said, standing in my doorway like she was afraid to come any closer. I looked up from the acquisition papers I'd been reviewing. "No, Miriam," I replied. "You ruined yourselves." I just turned the lights on. The board of directors held an emergency meeting that afternoon. The vote wasn't even close. Julian Donahue was removed as chairman by a margin of 8-1, with only Blake voting to support his father. Blake was arrested the next morning for securities fraud. The FBI showed up at his apartment at 6 a.m. with handcuffs and a warrant, and by 7 a.m. footage of him doing the perp walk in his pajamas was all over social media. A week later, Raina called with excitement in her voice, "Carter, you need to get down here right now. I found something that changes everything." In her conference room, she'd been working with forensic accountants, following every digital trail. We found encrypted files buried in Julian's old email server. Voicemails from Gloria Donahue, Miriam and Blake's real mother. Gloria had died in a car accident about 8 years ago before I'd married into the family. She'd been the one decent person in the entire Donahue clan. The voicemails were recorded 6 months before her end. "Julian, I know what you and Blake have been doing. I've seen the bank records, the fake invoices, the offshore accounts. This has to stop." But it was the final voicemail that made my hands shake. Recorded the day before Gloria's fatal car accident, her voice scared and desperate. "I'm leaving the firm tomorrow. I can't be part of this anymore, Julian. If anything happens to me, if there's any kind of accident..." Julian was behind it. He knows I was going to expose him. Single car crash on a rainy night. Ruled accidental due to weather conditions. But Gloria had tried to do the right thing, and they'd eliminated her for it. Julian tried to run. Federal agents caught him at Reagan National Airport, trying to board a private jet to the Cayman Islands with suitcases full of cash and a fake passport. The trial lasted 3 months. Blake got 18 years. Julian got life in prison for homicide. When they read the verdict, he didn't react at all, probably still believing that somehow his money and connections would find a way to save him. 1 year later, I stood in the cemetery where Gloria Donahue was buried, holding white tulips, her favorite flowers. The headstone was simple: "Beloved mother and truth teller." "You tried to stop them," I said quietly. "I'm sorry it took so long for someone to finish what you started." We'd created Wells Energy Solutions from the ashes of their corruption, a company that actually lived up to the values Julian and Blake had only pretended to care about. The Gloria Fund was my proudest achievement. Established with money recovered from the Donahue family's offshore accounts, supporting young inventors and entrepreneurs who'd been told they'd never amount to anything. At the fund's dedication ceremony, I saw Miriam in the crowd, looking different, older, more tired, but somehow more real than she'd ever looked during our marriage. "I'm proud of what you've built," she said quietly. "This is what it should have been all along." "Your mother would have loved this," I replied. The empire was real now, built on innovation instead of fraud, powered by hope instead of fear, creating value instead of just extracting it. This was what Gloria had been fighting for in her final days, and what I'd been working toward since that night I'd crashed through those glass doors. Not revenge, not even justice, but the chance to build something better from the ruins of what came before. It was everything I'd ever wanted, and it had been worth every broken piece of glass.